Ethan Hayes, dressed in a plain navy sweatshirt, well-worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers, stepped out of his modest SUV and into the parking lot of Summit Elite Motors, an upscale luxury car dealership in Phoenix, Arizona. The desert sun reflected brightly off the glossy exteriors of the high-end vehicles arrayed in neat rows, their surfaces gleaming like polished mirrors in the sweltering heat. Ethan took a moment to study the grandiose building. Its towering glass walls and sleek architecture exuded affluence, before heading toward the entrance. Recently, Ethan had purchased Summit Elite Motors as part of an ambitious expansion of his rapidly growing business portfolio. But rather than announcing his arrival with a fanfare of luxury cars or a designer suit that screamed success, he chose to arrive incognito. His casual attire was a deliberate decision, a test to gauge how the dealership's employees interacted with customers when they had no clue they were speaking to the owner. Through the glass doors, Ethan could see a group of staff clustered near the reception desk, their light-hearted banter and laughter creating an air of camaraderie. With an easy stride, he entered the cool, air-conditioned showroom, immediately enveloped by the contrasting aromas of leather upholstery, and freshly applied wax rows of pristine vehicles sparkled under the bright overhead lights, showcasing their impeccable craftsmanship. The jovial atmosphere subtly shifted as Ethan stepped in. He noticed fleeting glances from the staff, their eyes assessing his casual appearance. He caught the faint flicker of judgment in their expressions, a reaction that didn't escape him, but didn't faze him either. He'd come to observe, not to jump to conclusions. Among the staff, a sharply dressed woman in her early 40s approached him with a polite yet guarded smile. Her name tag read Carla, and her tailored blazer and designer heels radiated authority. However, her measured gaze and slightly raised eyebrows betrayed a hint of skepticism. "Welcome to Summit Elite Motors," she said, her voice carrying a polished professionalism. "Are you here to browse or looking for something specific?" Ethan returned her smile, his tone easy. "Just looking around for now," he replied, gesturing to the rows of vehicles. Carla's polite expression faltered momentarily before settling back into place. Though she didn't say it outright, her demeanor hinted at doubt. "Our inventory is tailored to a discerning clientele," she explained, her words carefully chosen but tinged with subtle condescension. "If you'd like, I can assist you with a pre-qualification process to ensure we find something suitable for your budget." Ethan's calm expression didn't waver as he registered her implication. "Pre-qualification?" he echoed mildly, his voice steady and neutral. "Yes," Carla continued, her tone still courteous but now edged with a hint of impatience. "We specialize in luxury and performance vehicles, but if you're open to exploring practical options, we have a range of pre-owned models that might be more accessible." She gestured toward a counter stacked with brochures showcasing older, modestly priced cars. Ethan's eyebrow quirked, though he maintained an air of composure. "That's an interesting assumption," he remarked evenly, the faintest trace of amusement in his voice. Carla hesitated, her smile tightening. "I'm simply trying to provide the best options based on, well, what our customers typically prefer," she replied, her professionalism slipping under the weight of her unspoken judgments. Ethan's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he turned his attention to the nearest vehicle, a sleek sports car gleaming under the lights. "And if I were interested in this one?" he asked casually, pointing at the car. Carla's eyes flickered with doubt, though she quickly masked it. "It's one of our premier models," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Perhaps I can run some numbers for you?" Ethan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "That sounds like a plan." As Carla moved toward her desk to retrieve a tablet, Ethan took a mental note of her demeanor and the subtle ways she'd sized him up. His casual test was already yielding insights, some expected, some disappointing. For now, though, he let the scene play out, curious to see how far her assumptions would carry her. Carla's demeanor grew more clipped as she addressed Ethan, her words carefully measured but unmistakably condescending. "I'm just trying to save you some time," she said, her tone framed as helpful. "These vehicles are more practical and reliable for most customers." Her insistence reinforced her belief that Ethan didn't belong in this high-end showroom. Despite her dismissive attitude, Ethan's expression remained calm. He tilted his head slightly and asked, "I appreciate the effort, but what would you suggest for someone like me?" His question caught Carla off guard, and her polished confidence wavered for a moment. "Maybe something more economical," she said hesitantly, as though carefully constructing a response she thought would be acceptable. Ethan noted the hesitation in her voice and the underlying biases driving her assumptions. Folding his arms, he leaned back slightly, observing her in silence. Unintentionally, Carla was revealing more about the culture of the dealership than she likely realized. Her dismissive attitude persisted as Ethan continued to examine the luxury vehicles. She watched him closely, her polite facade wearing thinner with each passing moment. When Ethan paused to admire a sleek silver coupe, Carla quickly approached, her tone sharp. "Please refrain from touching the vehicles unless you're ready to make a serious inquiry," she said, her words more directive than courteous. Ethan paused, his hand hovering near the car door. Slowly, he stepped back and turned to face Carla, his expression calm yet firm. "All right," he said evenly. "Let's hear it. What would you recommend for someone like me?" His question carried a pointed undertone, but Carla either missed it or chose to ignore it. Instead, she suggested once again that he consider more accessible options, even offering directions to a nearby dealership specializing in pre-owned vehicles. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his composure unshaken. "You're making a lot of assumptions," he remarked, his voice steady. Carla hesitated, then forced a tight smile. "I'm just being honest," she said. "It's better to be upfront than to waste anyone's time." Her words hung in the air, a silent judgment that he didn't belong in this setting. "Honest," Ethan repeated thoughtfully. Then, with a faint smile, he added, "I like honesty. In that case, how about I speak with the owner? Think you can make that happen?" Carla blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his direct request. She hesitated before responding. "The owner isn't available for casual visits. They're a very busy person." Ethan nodded slightly, his tone casual yet purposeful. "I'm sure they are," he said. "But maybe you could give them a call and let them know I'm here. I think they'd want to meet me." Her frustration began to seep through her polite exterior. "Look, sir," she said, her voice carrying a sharper edge. "If you're not serious about buying a car, I'll have to ask you to leave. I have other customers to attend to." Ethan's expression didn't waver. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "No problem," he said lightly, scrolling through his contacts. "I'll make the call myself." Carla's brow furrowed as she watched him dial around them. A few employees had paused their activities, their attention drawn to the unfolding scene. Ethan held up a finger, signaling for Carla to wait as he spoke into the phone. "Yeah, it's me," he said, his tone casual. "I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine, just a little misunderstanding. Can you let them know?" Ending the call, Ethan slipped his phone back into his pocket. He turned to Carla, his tone light but purposeful. "They'll be here shortly," he said. Carla stared at him, her confidence visibly faltering. "Who did you just call?" she asked, her voice tinged with unease. Ethan didn't answer directly, instead glancing casually around the showroom. "Guess we'll find out," he replied, a faint, knowing smile tugging at his lips. The showroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as the tension thickened. Ethan stood calmly beside one of the luxury SUVs, his hands in his pockets and his demeanor composed. Carla, however, was visibly struggling to maintain her poise. She clutched her clipboard tightly to her chest, stealing nervous glances toward Ethan, clearly unsettled by his calm confidence and the mystery surrounding his phone call. The sound of the front doors opening broke the uneasy silence. A sharply dressed man in a navy suit strode in, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tiled floor. His posture was upright and assured, and though his expression was serious, there was a warmth to his demeanor that immediately commanded attention. The man scanned the room, his eyes locking onto Ethan. A wide smile spread across his face as he approached. "Mr. Hayes," the man said, extending a hand with genuine enthusiasm. "Great to see you." The room seemed to freeze as the words hung in the air. Ethan shook his hand firmly, a faint smile on his lips. "Thanks for coming, Daniel. I appreciate it. Carla's clipboard slipped slightly from her grasp as she glanced between Ethan and Daniel, her face draining of color. The dawning realization hit her like a tidal wave. She stammered, struggling to find her voice. "Mr. Hayes?" she echoed, her tone a mix of disbelief and confusion. Daniel turned to Carla, his professional smile fading into a more curt, businesslike expression. "Yes, Carla," he said, his tone cool and formal. "I see you've already met Mr. Hayes. He's the new owner of Summit Elite Motors." Carla's jaw dropped slightly, her face flushing red with embarrassment. I didn't realize," she began. But Daniel cut her off, his voice sharp. "You didn't realize he was the owner?" Daniel asked, arching an eyebrow. "Or did you simply make assumptions based on his appearance?" Carla's mouth opened and closed as though searching for the right words, but none came. The weight of her actions seemed to settle heavily on her shoulders as she stepped back, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. Ethan raised a hand, signaling to Daniel to stop. "It's all right, Daniel," he said calmly, his voice measured and steady. "I think Carla and I just got off on the wrong foot." The words were gentle, but there was a gravity to them that filled the room. Everyone, Carla, the staff, even Daniel, seemed to hold their breath. Ethan turned his gaze back to Carla, his expression unreadable. "I'd like to know, Carla," he began, his tone soft but firm. "If I hadn't been the owner, would you have treated me any differently?" Carla's face turned an even deeper shade of red. I didn't mean," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his calm gaze unwavering. "Didn't mean what?" he asked. "Didn't mean to assume that someone like me doesn't belong here, or didn't mean to show me less respect than someone in a suit and tie." The silence in the room was deafening. Carla opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her silence spoke volumes, and Ethan nodded, as though her lack of an answer was all the confirmation he needed. Turning back to Daniel, Ethan's voice carried a newfound authority. "Let's gather everyone in the conference room," he said. "I think it's time we had a discussion about how things are run around here." Daniel nodded immediately. "Of course, Mr. Hayes." The staff began filing into the sleek, glass-walled conference room, their expressions ranging from nervous curiosity to outright embarrassment. Carla lingered at the back, her usual confident demeanor replaced with visible unease. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Daniel took a position near the door, his arms crossed as he observed the scene unfold. Clearing his throat, Ethan waited for the murmurs to die down before speaking. "Thank you all for joining me on such short notice," he began, his tone calm but resolute. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ethan Hayes. As of last month, I'm the new owner of Summit Elite Motors." Ethan's announcement landed with a ripple of surprise that spread across the room. Some employees exchanged uneasy glances, while others stared at their hands, avoiding his gaze. Carla, seated near the back, looked particularly shaken, her flushed face a stark contrast to her usual composed demeanor. "I came here today dressed casually for a reason," Ethan continued. "I wanted to see how this dealership operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to understand what a potential customer might experience when they walk through these doors." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "What I experienced was disappointing. I was judged, not for who I am or what I might bring to the table, but for how I looked. And while I'm not here to single anyone out, we need to have an honest conversation about what this says about the culture of this dealership." Ethan's gaze swept across the room, briefly landing on Carla before shifting to encompass the group as a whole. "This isn't just about me," he said firmly. "It's about every person who walks through these doors. Every customer deserves respect, regardless of how they look or what you think they can afford." Carla shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan turned his attention directly to her. "Carla," he said, his voice softening slightly, "do you have anything you'd like to say?" All eyes turned to her. Her voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. I made a mistake," she admitted, her tone trembling. "I misjudged you, and for that, I'm truly sorry." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. "I hope this experience serves as a reminder, not just for you, but for all of us. Change starts with accountability." The glass-walled conference room felt unusually tense as Ethan addressed the group. "This isn't just about one incident," he said, his tone measured but firm. "It's about building a culture of respect and inclusivity, not just because it's good for business, but because it's the right thing to do." One of the younger employees hesitated before raising a hand. Ethan gestured for him to speak. "Mr. Hayes," the associate began nervously, "I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions." Ethan nodded. "I understand," he said. "Bias is a part of being human, but it's not enough to simply try. We need to actively challenge those biases and create an environment where every customer feels valued." He allowed the room to absorb his words before continuing. "This dealership has built a reputation for excellence, but true excellence is about more than the cars we sell. It's about the experience we provide, an experience rooted in respect and fairness." His gaze returned to Carla, who appeared visibly shaken but listened intently. "This isn't about singling anyone out," Ethan emphasized. "It's about holding ourselves accountable and striving to do better." Turning to the group, he announced, "From today forward, we will implement mandatory inclusivity and bias awareness training for every employee. This isn't about punishment, it's about growth. Everyone who walks into this dealership deserves to feel respected, whether they're a customer or a member of our team." The staff murmured in agreement, the weight of Ethan's words settling over them. Carla's face flushed with renewed embarrassment, but her expression also carried a hint of resolve. Ethan shifted his stance, leaning slightly against the table. "Let me make one thing clear," he said. "I didn't come here today to humiliate anyone. I came to understand the culture I've inherited and figure out how we can make it better. I believe in second chances, but accountability is key. A mistake is only a mistake if you're willing to learn from it and do better moving forward." The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. The staff nodded in agreement, the earlier embarrassment giving way to determination. As the meeting concluded and the employees began filing out, Carla lingered near the door. Taking a deep breath, she approached Ethan, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest. "Mr. Hayes," she began hesitantly, her voice low, "I just wanted to thank you for giving me a chance to do better." Ethan turned to face her, his expression calm but serious. Carla continued, her tone earnest. "I realize I made a serious mistake today, and I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, but I'm committed to learning and improving." Ethan regarded her for a moment before replying, his voice steady. "I hope you mean that. Carla, words are important, but actions speak louder. If you're serious about making changes, I believe people can grow if they're willing to try." Carla nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I am," she said firmly. Ethan gave her a slight nod before stepping away. As Carla returned to her duties, a renewed sense of purpose was evident in her demeanor. Standing in the showroom, Ethan took a moment to reflect. This was about more than running a dealership. It was about creating a space where people were valued for who they were, not how they looked. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but under his leadership, Summit Elite Motors would become more than a luxury car dealership. It would stand as a model of respect, fairness, and inclusivity.